I think those students want the same thing every other student wants. They want to feel like what they're doing is important and they want to feel like what they do matters and it's valuable to them.
That's today's guest, podcaster, music educator, speaker, and author Theresa Hoover on the value of making sure students know they matter. Welcome to Music Ed Insights. I'm leadership trainer and former band director Alan Fire, here with composer and co-college music education program head Steve Shanley.
Each episode, Alan and I talk with national thought leaders in music education with practical insights for K-12 music educators.
Steve, tell us about our guest.
Theresa Hoover is a music educator, speaker, and writer. She is an advocate for student voice in the music room and works to empower students throughout their musical experiences and help teachers transform their classrooms to become student-centered learning environments. Theresa has taught instrumental, general, and vocal music in a variety of settings, is the author of Empowering Ensembles with Technology, the co-author of Pass the Baton, and the co-host of the podcast Pass the Baton. Find Theresa's full bio, show notes, and resources at musicedinsights.com. Alan, what was the takeaway you had from this episode?
You know I'm a big fan of this topic. She does a great job of explaining that students can handle more musical responsibilities with their peers and that they also appreciate clear guidelines and boundaries, and that part is up to you. What about you, Steve?
I got to be honest, I can fall into that trap of rolling my eyes every time student empowerment gets mentioned. And for that reason, Theresa was the perfect guest to speak on this topic because she knows why people like me might be suspicious of that term and concept. She's a rock star. She totally gets us. Ideas a novice could implement tomorrow in any music classroom, as well as those common problems we should expect to encounter.
Yes. And I was a little challenged by the idea of student input into repertoire selection, but her story about that sixth grade class makes a good success story. Insiders get bonus episodes. If you want the benefits of being a Music Ed Insights insider, head to our website to learn more. For now, let's meet Theresa Hoover.
Theresa Hoover, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me here.
We've asked you to join us today and speak about empowering students in our music classrooms. So let's first start with a very general definition. What do you mean exactly by empowering the students? I think these days some of our listeners might say, hey, my students have plenty of power. I spend most of my time trying to keep them from talking when they aren't supposed to, getting them to show up to performances, dealing with the demands of their parents. The students all seem plenty empowered to me.
That's a good question. I guess when we think about empowerment in terms of our music classrooms, it's really thinking about the students having ownership as a musician and having ownership as a learner. So the students are able to make more decisions, have a say in what they're doing and learning in the classroom. But most importantly, they can take that outside of the classroom and apply it to things that are important in their own lives. So we're thinking about students being musical, not only when they're with us, but also when they're without us.
Just to clarify from the outset, this is not just giving them a complete free-for-all to decide when they're going to talk, all of what they're going to play or sing.
Correct, right. It is not a free-for-all, and we can get into like how you get there. But just the idea that a student can, find a piece of music that they're interested in playing and actually practice that on their own, or they can find something and think to themselves like, oh, it might sound neat if I crescendoed here. Like, yes, that is a musical decision. Things that often I was mostly a band teacher. We as the conductor, those decisions that we always made, letting the students have an opportunity. Because the thing is, if the only thing the kids learn is how to play the second saxophone part for E flat suite, what have we really taught them? But if we can get the saxophone player to go out and find music he's interested in and play things that they want and continue making music without us, that's where it's pretty powerful.
So I'm intrigued by this because I think when we talk about empowering the students in the classroom, our first thought is this is all going to happen in the classroom. But it sounds like later we're going to talk about ways they can feel empowered not in the classroom as well.
I think it transfers. So if they can feel like they're musicians and musical and these creative musical beings, it's going to extend beyond the classroom.
And these things are applicable even in, let's just say, the most challenging of musical environments where the teachers are very worried about classroom management and in some cases even safety issues, that there are ways we can empower the students even in some of those scenarios where maybe often we're spending our time on that first level of Maslow's hierarchy, just making sure everybody stays safe.
I would think so, yes. You're going to approach it somewhat differently, right? Because as you said, safety is super, super important. But I think those students want the same thing every other student wants. They want to feel like what they're doing is important and they want to feel like what they do matters and it's valuable to them. I think that also comes down to a lot of it. We have to think about what is it that's going to be interesting to a 12-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 9-year-old, what's going to be the musical thing that's going to hook those kids in.
Chances are good if they're hooked in, if they feel a little ownership, they feel like this is a valuable class for them and they get some say in it, maybe their behavior improves a bit too.
Yep. Because how many times when kids are behaving, is it because they don't want to do what you're doing? So if they're interested in it, you've got a better chance that they're going to want to do it.
Okay, so it sounds like this could apply to anyone listening, regardless of the grade level or the subject area or the demographics of your situation. So let's dig into the specifics. But I'd like to start especially with some easy things that we could, for example, implement tomorrow. What are
Yeah.
some simple first steps that teachers of all grade levels, musical subject areas, they could try right away without needing to read a book or attend a symposium?
I mean, the first thing I would say is all of your students have a voice. Do they have the opportunity to use that voice? And I know you're going to say, of course they do. They never stop talking. Well, yeah, I know. But do they get to, put that voice to use in a musical way? And I think one of the first things I often recommend people do, so let's say you're an ensemble director, is when you get to the end of a rep, instead of immediately telling the students all of the things that you just heard, ask them, what did you hear? What did you notice? What sounded good? What maybe didn't work that we need to address? And the first time you do that, they're going to stare at you. You're just going to get blank stares because they're used to you telling them. But then say, no, really, I want to know. And if you can't get them to say anything, then say, all right, what I want you to do instead, turn to your stand partner, turn to whoever's next to you, tell that person what you heard.
They're a little more willing to just tell their neighbor than maybe to
Exactly.
raise their hand and volunteer in front of the whole class. Because what if I say the wrong thing? What if my
Right.
opinion is wrong?
Right. And one thing you can do to help with that is to prepare the students ahead of time. So before you do the rep, say, hey, when we get to the end of this, I'm going to ask you. So you can also just prepare them so that they have like that time to think like, okay, what might I say? What am I going to talk about? And the kind of cool thing is it might be something that you didn't recognize, especially if it's a full large ensemble. Maybe you didn't know that the second saxophones weren't doing what, or maybe you didn't hear because we're all human. We can only hear so much, but you're going to get some information from the students. And honestly, I've done this with my fourth graders all the way up through high school students. So any of them can think about these things and you're just showing them that what they hear and what they feel and all of that matters. It matters in the classroom and you want to know what they have to say. Another kind of fun thing along the same lines is you get to the end of the rehearsal and you have every student write down what are the first three things we should do next time. You basically getting the kids to make the lesson plan for you,
Mhm.
right? You ask them, what are the next three things that we need to work on? And they might tell you something that they're struggling with. They might tell you something that they hurt somebody else, but you're going to find out from them, okay, here are the things that we need to focus on. So you're taking their feedback. And I think you even say the next day, all right, many of you recognize that we really needed to work on the slow section of this piece. So that's what we're going to start with today. And now they're thinking like, oh, she listened to me. Huh. I had an opinion and somebody cared. So just those little things, you're getting them more involved. And it is, like you said, it's helping you too.
So I'm picking up on sometimes you might just finish a phrase and say, what do you think? And other times you might say, give them a little bit more guided question like, does anybody have ideas for what we could do different with dynamics? Is
Yeah.
that correct that you might
Yep.
do both approaches?
Absolutely. And what's neat is when you start doing that, the students will start offering things even when you don't ask. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but like in a positive way. Like you'll run a phrase and you'll be kind of thinking to yourself. And then someone's hand goes up and says, what do you think if we did this? And I'm like, oh, that hadn't even occurred to me, but because they start thinking and they start just realizing that what they think matters and what their opinions matter.
So far, these ideas all apply definitely to ensemble
Mm.
settings, and some of them could be applicable in a general music setting where we're all maybe playing an instrument. I'm curious if you've got some specific easy ways we can empower our elementary general music classrooms as well that
Yeah.
might not necessarily need to involve all of them playing Orff instruments at the same time or playing ukuleles at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my partner in crime is Catherine Finch. She's a general music teacher in Chicago area, and she is amazing. And I've everything I know about that I've learned from her. So I'm giving credit to Catherine for this. What she has taught me is that everything that I can do with the ensembles, she does with her littles, even kindergarten. And that might be, hey, we're going to be singing this song. How should we sing it today? Or if there's a certain song where Catherine is typically the leader, after they do it a couple times, she'll say to the students, who wants to be the leader today? And someone else can come in and be the leader for that song. If you're getting ready to do a song or a story that involves instruments, maybe say to the student, like, what instrument should we use here? If this is going to be a mouse sound, what instrument should you use? And, someone will say drums. What kind of, and you have to, but you give the kids the opportunity to think musically.
So, inevitably, when we try new things, they don't always go as planned. And we've already talked a little bit about some of them, but I'm curious if there are some common things you've heard from people who said, Theresa, I tried what you said and it did not work. It did not go how I wanted. Or what are some of the most common challenges you've seen teachers seem to encounter as they try implementing these strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. We've heard that from teachers, and I've also experienced it myself, where I guess I've done something, I go, oh, that didn't work. So just know that I have had the problem myself. Usually, the problem is that I did not prepare the students well enough. That like the scaffolding was not in place. So typically, when we get these ideas, we want to just jump in and do it, but we don't think about like what do we need to do to get there. So to take like again let's take the general music example where we're thinking about maybe kids adding motions to something. Well, maybe we've never really done any movement before, so the students don't know even what the opportunities or what the options are that could work. So we just jump in and say, okay, at this point we want you to do movement, and then they all just go wild and crazy. A lot of times it's just because we haven't prepared them, or we've maybe given too much freedom. Like I've said, okay, at this point I want you to move, but I didn't say I want you to move in your space, making sure that you keep your hands and body parts to yourself. So we have to think about that. We have to set them up for success. So that's by explaining what our expectations are, what the parameters are. Especially if this is their first time getting to have some freedom, have some exploration, and having that opportunity. If we're thinking about, our ensemble students, again, giving some parameters, giving some frameworks, like maybe I'm going to tell the students, go ahead and turn and talk to a neighbor. And I need to say, and make sure that you use your inside speaking voices or things like that to make sure that they're prepared. They know the expectations, laying those foundations so that, that the students can be successful. And then you can gradually take those scaffolds away.
So far, we've mostly been talking about some of those easier to implement ideas for the teachers who are either thinking further into the future or those who have already tried a couple of these things. I'm curious what, let's call it advanced placement student empowerment looks like.
Yeah.
What do you see in your classroom? Where can this lead? What does this look like when it's just maxed out? So again, not something that I'm going to try tomorrow that I've never done before, but a little something to tempt me into thinking, oh, wow, in 2 years, I could have this. What is this in its best form?
I think some of the neatest things I've seen are when the students truly put together the performance in one way or another, that they can take complete ownership of a whole entire thing and not just a musical phrase here or there. A great example, so Catherine and I also have a podcast related to all of this. And we interviewed a guy, Ryan Diefendorfer, who he had been doing things gradually and gradually over the years, and then learned about the Orpheus ensembles. And the Orpheus ensembles is basically a conductorless group. And he talked to his students, said, "Hey, I think we should try this. You're all in charge." And the students worked together. They picked out repertoire. They ran the rehearsals, and Ryan scaffolded it really nicely. Like the first rehearsal, he would say, "Okay, only juniors can offer feedback during this rehearsal." And then the next rehearsal, okay, only seniors. And as it went along, he scaffolded the process. But they got to the point where the students, they put it all together. He was there. He was in the room. He was present. He was, participating in rehearsal. But the students led everything. Even I think he told me at one point, for one of the pieces, they decided they did need a conductor. So they decided amongst themselves who was going to be the conductor. But they were able to take all of those things and put it together and do really, really well. I've also seen people do that with sixth graders. Now, a slightly different approach, but the kids were able to decide what they wanted to happen during the performance. It was a charity performance. They picked what charity the proceeds were going to go to. They helped, put the music together. They even went shopping for the stuff for the charity at the end. But the students really just did it all, and the teacher was there to support them and do the things that they couldn't do, like the kids couldn't send certain emails and things like that. But they did it. So I think when we look as music teachers, we can look to like this idea of performance as something that really we can help the students make it their own.
What else do we need to know about empowering students in our music classrooms?
The only thing that we haven't really talked about too much yet is this idea of getting the students to be able to create their own music, right? We've talked a lot about how they can, work within the repertoire and things like that and make the musical decisions. And that's all really important, really valuable. But I think we also need to remember that as musicians, not only do we recreate someone else's music, but we should have opportunities to create our own. And again, I think this is something that our general music friends do really well. They often have the kids composing and improvising and all of that. And sometimes we forget about it at the secondary level, especially if we're in a concert band or orchestra or chorus, not in jazz band. So just thinking about little ways that we can give kids the opportunity to improvise, to compose. And it doesn't have to be some huge project, where we spend a whole entire class period composing one thing. It could just be, hey, we've been learning a lot of things in the key of concert E flat. Why don't you see what happens if you play around with those notes, play them in a different order, just giving them some little opportunities to experiment musically. If you've been learning about different kinds of articulations, encourage students to write a melody and use those articulations and then play it on their instruments, or just give them those opportunities to be a musician as one who composes, who improvises and does all of that.
Yeah, great reminders. I think you're absolutely right. And especially for some of our older teachers who did not have that creating standard so front and center and clearly stated, hey, if you're teaching in the arts, they got to be creating. That there's generations of us who learned, and I include myself in that, who learned to teach concert band where the creating part was just not even a thing. You did it in jazz band and that was it. And I think a lot of people agree, yeah, that's an important thing. What am I going to do? Teach my whole band how to write a sonata? And they don't realize that it doesn't need to be that full extreme,
Right.
that there are ways. And it sounds like this student empowerment is a great way to help meet some of that creating standard.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Theresa, where can teachers go for more information about this?
Okay, so I mentioned Catherine. So Catherine is, like I said, my partner in crime. We co-wrote a book and we co-host a podcast called Pass the Baton. So I would say first thing is go to the Pass the Baton. It's called Pass the Baton, Empowering Students in Music Education. Find the podcast on whatever it is that you do and just start listening. We are very fortunate to have interviewed some really awesome music teachers from, every area, every level. And they just kind of share their stories about what they do in their classroom and how it works. And I think it's great because when Catherine and I wrote the book, it was our perspectives, it was the things that we were doing, and we were able to share a lot that way. But I love being able to share what other people are doing, and some of them are big, huge projects, like I mentioned Ryan with his Orpheus, but some of them are just like little ways they think about teaching in the classroom, and everything's very actionable. So yeah, again, the podcast and book are both Pass the Baton. The website is passthebatonbook.com. I also have my own website, which has all kinds of other random stuff called Off the Beaten Path in Music. Most of it has to do with, again, the same lines of student empowerment. A lot of music tech stuff. That's like the other nerdy hat that I wear. I love music technology. I love figuring out how to incorporate that into what we do. And if you're on any social media platforms, it's just at Musical Theresa. So, and I love to talk, as you guys can both find out. So if anybody wants to talk about this stuff or chat or just exchange messages, it's really fun for me.
All right. Well, we very much appreciate you joining us today to give us a little introduction to student empowerment. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Oh boy, I hope so.
Okay, here we go. Your favorite restaurant in the Phoenix area?
Okay, I'll give you one that I love. It's called it's the Blue Adobe, and it's in Mesa, and it's New Mexican food, and it's so good.
What defines New Mexican food?
It's just like a very slightly different flavor profile, but the enchiladas, and you can get them what they call Christmas style, which means it has the red and the green sauce.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
All right, a favorite piece of music, composer, or performer that you wish more people knew about?
All right, so somebody I've been listening to a lot recently that probably isn't new to other people, but maybe it is, I don't know. Sam Greenfield. He is a saxophone player from the Philly area, does a lot of, it's like a jazz pop funk mix, but what I love is the music is just fun. I feel like sometimes we forget that music can be fun, especially when we're in the practice room hour after hour, but he makes everything just look fun, and I enjoy that kind of stuff.
How about a favorite film or TV series that you've enjoyed recently?
I just went to see Wicked. I really, really enjoyed it. So, and in fact, I might even go see it again.
I haven't heard anybody pan it. I've heard people be pleasantly surprised or extremely surprised.
Yeah.
That really met and exceeded expectations.
Yeah, it might be the first Broadway to film adaptation that everyone seems happy with. I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah. Well, and it's been fun. I saw it with a couple of friends who are not musicians, and they adored it just as much. And I love that.
How about the most memorable live music performance you've attended?
Can I take a little turn on this one?
We love turns around here.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got the wheel.
All right. I'm going to tell you about a recent one. And so let me give you a little bit of backstory. My non-music teaching hours are spent. I love trail running, and I'm part of a running group. We run together several times a week. And one of the members of our group is an amateur musician, and he plays in the local symphony. So a whole bunch of us, I think about 30 people from the running group, went to see his community symphony performance very recently. And it was the neatest thing in the world, because you had 30 people who usually only get together in running shorts and, we're all sweaty after that, but all dressed up. You would think that we were at a black tie affair. Everyone got all dressed up. We went to see the community symphony play, and it was good. It sounded like a community symphony. But then when you thought about the fact that on stage were 75 people who were not professional musicians, who were just doing it because they loved it, who got together every week and practiced because they loved it. It was neat. And that kind of made me think about, like, this is why I do what I do. It's not because I'm trying to get people who are going to join the Phoenix Symphony, right? It's because I want every single one of my students to feel like when they leave my program that they can still make music when they're an adult, even if they're an engineer or, a doctor or a this or a that they can still make music. So that's probably not exactly the answer you were looking for, but it was a really special night.
I bet if Christopher Small were here, that would be the exact answer he was looking for. That's a beautiful response. And finally, a book recommendation. Bonus if it doesn't have much or anything to do with music.
I did read a good one recently. It's called Do Nothing. And I think every music teacher should read this book. It's by Celeste, I think it's Headley. But it's all about this idea that we do too much all of the time. And if we were to try to take time to not even just do nothing, but do less, what we do is going to be more meaningful to us. Every music teacher should read it.
Well, Theresa Hoover, we are big fans of empowering students, which is part of why we found each other to do today's interview. And so thank you so much for being with us and giving our listeners even more ways to make music great for their students.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Music Ed Insights.
We're supported by Group Dynamic, a leading provider of youth leadership workshops. Alan works with dozens of schools each year to help develop their leaders. Learn more at groupdynamic.net/youth-leadership.
Or you could email me at alan@groupdynamic.net. Also sponsored by the Co-College Music Education Program. They've got a website too.
Just click their link at our website or email me at shanley@coe.edu.
Also, The Normal Design, helping normal companies and people create memorable, meaningful, and professional designs and branding. More at thenormaldesign.com.
And Winterset Websites, website design and maintenance. wintersetwebsites.com.
Our Facebook page is Music Ed Insights.
Our website has program notes, links, and a one-page download of this episode's key takeaways. That's musicedinsights.com.
New episodes generally drop every couple weeks on Monday.
Get current.
Stay relevant.
Music Ed Insights.